Hi, this is Ohfor. Let's explore looping in Osiris. Okay, so welcome to my third and what I actually think is probably going to be the last video I do on Osiris, because there's or at least specifically about Osiris, because there's not that much to say about it. You can do a ton of stuff with Osiris, but as I've mentioned before, going through all the 500 or so calls and queries and whatever is in there is never going to be the scope of my videos. I will, however, just share a few eye openers and hopefully sow a few ideas in your minds of how it can be useful to your projects. I would say it's probably never really necessary, but there are certain things that can make your life as a modder easier by understanding Osiris and understanding how it can connect to your mod and how it can connect to the game world. So let's dig into that. Now, the most direct way we can sort of connect with Osiris is by sending Osiris an event. There are a few items in the game that also do that. Like if you remember, for potions, there's a use action that is sort of like consume the potion. But there is also a use action that is send an Osiris event that this item has been used, and then Osiris takes over and spawns a beholder or whatever. This is all fine. Let's take a look at how we can do that. So I am going to open up the story editor, and here we go. I don't think, no, this is tutorial mod 2. I don't have a story in here, so we'll just do file, new, and we'll call this glow underscore, what's that, glow? Yeah, to text events. And I'll show you in a minute what that is. So here we have our story, and I'll just, since it's a completely new story we've added, I'll just do the usual generate definitions, build and reload. Okay, so the now story editor is fully up to speed. It knows about our little script, story, whatever we want to call it, and we'll do something simple. So as you recall, there's like, you can react to events in the story editor. So you can react to level loaded or various events that happen in the game world. And one of these events that we're going to be looking at is called text event. So it goes like this: if text event tut. So we're going to be making our own text event, and we'll call it tut. So what this means is that whenever the text event happens in the Osiris engine with this string, then our little piece of code here is going to get notified. Okay, so if this event happens, then debug text. We're going to need the host character. So and get host character player. So what this does is basically, well, it should be self-explanatory. It gets the player that's currently the host of the game session we're running. Then debug text, hello world, because why not? Okay. Simplest script ever, almost. And let's save that and just make sure it builds. It should. Even I can't make a mess of, no, it didn't. I spoke too soon. What do we have here? Debug text, yeah, of course. It needs a player. So now even I can't mess up, huh? And so let's see. Building story. Okay, so that's fine. So now I'm going to do a build and reload. Now I know everything is fine. So I'm just going to, so build and reload means you build the script, that's fine, but you also force the game world to reload the story engine so that your script is actually active. And then we go back and I can see we have Shadowheart joining us today. Hello, Shadowheart. Now, how do we send this event to the Osiris engine? Well, you may have already used it, but if we go to the console, and then we go, I'm just going to move this over here, and then we go OE. So OE is short for Osiris event. And for some reason, when I press space here, it sort of auto-completes. I don't know why it does that. It's really annoying. But it just basically selects the first on the list and decides that's what it wants to do. I don't know why. Maybe somebody can point me to a reason why this is happening. Anyway, OE, Osiris event, and that is a text event. So if I do Osiris event toot, we see here, Shadowheart goes, hello world. So she heard it, or I should say, the story engine heard it. Okay, and we go, stop that. OE toot again, and hello world. So every time we enter this command, it sends a text event throughout the engine, and our script can pick up on it. There are a few events like that the game also uses, that you can sort of listen into. I can't think of a good example right now. So anyway, the event fires from the console. I mean, normally in the game world you wouldn't have access to the console like this, but I'm just basically demonstrating how this works, because it will also serve as an example of what else we can be doing when we connect it to the game world. And then basically we do a little output text like this. So this, in a very simple form, is a text event. However, it's not particularly useful as it stands. So let's add a little bit of magic to it. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to add a parameter to our toot event. And the way that works is you do if text event toot, that's fine, and get text event, how is it again? Param string, yeah, okay, there we go. And then it's going to get the first parameter of whatever you typed by saying 1. So that's the first parameter. You could have like 5 parameters. It's not fancy enough to sort of have like name parameters and whatever else you can do on a command line normally, but it's good enough. So we are going to say this is going to be our hello string. So now we're getting the first parameter and getting the hello string, putting that into a variable called hello string. We're still getting host character, and now we are going to, you can probably guess it, put that into the debug text. And assuming I didn't mess up, this should compile fine, and it does. So we switch back into the game world, and then we are going to go OE I still don't know how to prevent that autocomplete. Toot, hey, what? And again, with the automatic completion, this is really annoying. I don't know why that happens, but it should just, whatever. So OE, toot, hey, exclamation point. And here we go. So we read the parameter from the command line or the script line and sent it into Shadowheart. And she then, well, she doesn't. There's just a debug text showing over her head, mimicking back to us what we said. Now, this in its own, probably not particularly useful. So let's see how we can expand a bit upon that. And what I'm thinking is that, well, we have in Osiris a possibility or the option of creating databases or facts, as they're called. Maybe that's a discussion we need to pick up at some point, facts and whatever, the terminology used in Osiris, but you know what, it's not really that important. So up here in our init section, we are going to add some tokens and some text. So db to underscore texts, because we're keeping it simple. And then we're going to do hello world. So what I've created here is an entry in db underscore to underscore texts with 2 strings as columns. I mean, just think of this as a database. I know it's not, but it's just, it helps my mind anyway. So column 1, hello, and column 2, hello world. And let's add a couple of more just for good measure. Then we do hey, and then we do, I'm very original here today, hey world, and ahoy world. So there we go. Now we have 3 entries in our database. Okay. Then we are going to change this a little bit. So this is now our hello token. So far we're all good. We're getting the first parameter and we're putting it into something called hello token. And then we just need to see if we can find it in our list of text. So we do and db underscore to underscore texts, and then hello token and hello string. Now what this does is it's going to go look at our table or database, and then it's going to see, can we find something where the first column matches the hello token we've gotten? And if so, grab the second column and put it into hello string. Okay, that is it's a little bit more complicated, and I'll show you why this can blow up in just a while. But for now, this is what we do. So we haven't changed a lot. We're just basically saying what we're getting from the command line or from the script or the console is a token, and we're going to find a string that matches that token up here, and then we're going to output it to the character just as before. And let's see if I'm actually any good at this Osiris stuff. Let's see if I can get this building on first try. Fantastic. This doesn't happen a lot. Okay. And then we go, so hello, hey, and ahoy. We go back in game. And then we do OE toot. And then I'm going to fight the autocompleter once again. OE toot hello. And Shadowheart goes hello world. That is fine. And then we do hey. And she goes hey world. And we'll do the last one. Sure, you get the idea by now. Oh, hello autocomplete. Oh, to ahoy. And ahoy world. Okay, so now we can send a token to our script, and the script then does a lookup based on that and reacts to that. Now, again, sending this text event and having a debug text appear, that's not what this video is about. It's just the method I use to show, because this could be anything, right? It could be like, if this happens to your character, then do something else, and we'll get to that, and we're almost there. I just want to show that flow of how you can react to something happening in the game world, and then have your lookup tables or make some decisions about what should happen next, and then apply that to the character. Okay? It's really quite straightforward like that. So debug text on its own is not all that useful. Let's try and make this a little bit more useful. Before we do, however, I think I'm going to try and blow your minds. And by that I mean I'm going to demonstrate how Osiris is deceptively like a familiar programming language, and then absolutely is not. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's go back to the story editor, and then I'm just going to do something very, very simple. I'm going to add another column to the database of greeting text, or whatever we want to call them, and then I'm going to duplicate. So I'm going to have two tokens now with triggering a hello, and then on the second one I'm going to go, what is this world? Question mark. Okay, and I'm going to change nothing else. I'm just going to save that, and then I'm going to do the all build and reload. Okay, now the big question is, what happens now if I send the hello token to our script? In a traditional scripting language, right? You would expect it to do something like, it's going to find the first instance of our hello token and then output that. And that would be the end of it. And that's how normal programming languages work. But let's see what happens here. So I go back in game, and then I'm going to find toot hello. I'm going to fire that. And look what happened. I got not one, but two debug text happening. Right? This blew my mind when I realized this. I know if you read all the guides and tutorials on Osiris scripting that are on mod.io, it's stated there that this is the behavior, but it still sort of blew my mind when this first occurred to me. And I'm showing you this because it's something you need to be aware of, because this can be useful, but it can certainly also surprise you if you're not aware of this type of behavior. So let's go take a look at what's actually going on. Well, so we get the text event, right? That's fine. And we get the token, that's also fine. So we have text event toot and token hello. And then it goes, and can you find hello token in db to texts, to two texts, and put that into hello string. And it's going to respond by saying, it's not that simple. It's not a question of whether or not it can find that token and put it into hello string. No, it's going to scan the database for all instances of this hello token and put it into hello string, and it's going to execute. It's going to branch off from this point on. And this is where it gets tricky, right? Because that's not what we're used to from, if you don't have a background in scripting, I guess you're not even looking at this video, because most of this will probably not make sense, but maybe whatever. But normally our scripting languages follow a sequence. Like if you write in Lua or JavaScript or Python or C# or whatever, well, C# is not a scripting language, but hey, bear with me. Normal programming languages, it follows a sequence, right? You start at the top and then you work your way down. And if you are going to loop over something or branch over something, there's going to be a loop construct of some sort to deal with. Not so here. It is essentially going to take all subsequent lines and execute them for each occurrence of our hello token, right? Which also means that the sequence of statements in your scripts or stories, they matter, because what's going to happen now is that I'm going to be branching out into two branches here, one for every instance of our hello token, and then I'm going to call get host character and then debug text, right? So performance-wise, I mean, I don't know what the cost of these calls are, but assume there is a cost, and it's always good practice to try and terminate your scripts as early as possible and not run a query for something more than necessary. So in this case, it makes sense. Get host character is always going to be needed. It's going to be one instance you need of that, and it's not going to change. So I would then move that up here, possibly right after the getting the event parameters because it makes sense. Then we get host characters, and then we do the lookup, and then we do the debug text. And it's still going to output, in this case, two text as debug, because there are two tokens with the same token identifier as we've defined this first column. Okay, this can be rather mind-blowing, but let's see what else we can. Let's see what we can use that for. So I'm going to make a new text event, and I'm going to listen to the word list. I'm not going to take any parameters this time, and get host character. So this is still the same. And then I'm going to ask Osiris, can you please list me what's in here? Now that we know it's going to loop over it, we can sort of say, okay, fine, can you list me every token, and then just an underscore here, where we basically say we don't care about the second parameter. And then debug text player, comma, token. So this should now list us all the tokens that are in our database. Let's see if that compiles. And it did. Let's go back in game and see if this behaves in any way like we expect, or there are some surprises. And I have half a feeling that this is going to be a little bit of a surprise, but let's just see. So once I finish my battle with the autocompleter, I'm going to go OE list. And now it outputs hello, hey, ahoy, hello. Let's do it a couple of more times. Sorry, there we go. Hello, hey, ahoy, hello. So it's basically now we've created a loop over our database, and it didn't require any coding. So one of the things that come up, let me see if I can find a good example of that. So if we search, so Osiris, as I mentioned before, it's not fully a functional language as opposed to a declarative language. I forget now the official term for for what we could call normal scripting language, but it's also not important. As can be seen here, there is no looping as such in functional languages, and that's also true in Osiris. I will show you before the end of this video how we can do a loop that operates the way sort of traditional programmers are used to. I don't mean any offense to anybody who does functional programming for a living, by the way. It's just, I think the majority of us come from a background of programming in languages that don't operate like this. That's my assumption anyway. However, back to the matter of hand, we have now looped and we didn't even know it. Because if we look at the code, well, we did know it because I knew it was going to happen. But if we look at the code, there's no declaration of a loop. We're just basically saying, can you give me something from DB to texts and put it into token, please? Now, let's surprise matters a little bit. Because what happens if I then also say, I want the hello string from that? So now I'm basically saying, could you give me all the tokens and all the hello strings in the database? And then we're going to need to do something meaningful with the output. We're going to do and concatenate. Concatenate is one of the Osiris calls for concatenating strings. We can see up here it's taking string A and string B and putting it into result. So we're going to say concatenate token hello string and put it into result string. And then we are going to output the result string. Okay, so now we've expanded our loop to have 2 dimensions, basically looking at both tokens and hello strings, and just for debug purposes, append these 2 strings together and then output them as debug text. Now, we can make this a little clever exercise, but what do you think is going to be the output of this? You have like 10 seconds. I'm going to do a build and reload. And then we go back to Shadowheart and we're going to do OE list. And probably did not surprise too much, because what we are getting is what we expected. Right? So we're getting the 4 tokens, and then we're getting the text that was connected to the token. And I'm just going to try something very quickly, because I have a sneaky suspicion that if I do this, so I'm going to add another one to the list. So now I'm going to take this text, hello world, and also have it respond to the hey token. This, again, this doesn't make sense. I mean, this is not how you would normally organize it. I'm just trying to demonstrate how Osiris acts, because it's useful knowledge for you. Once you start building your own databases and you start doing more advanced stuff, you need to know how to query it and how not to query it to get the results that you expect. And we go back here. Okay, so in my head, I saw this play out a little bit differently, but now that I think about it, no, this is actually what is expected. And maybe we shouldn't be covering 2 and 3 dimensional list. But as you add columns to your databases, you need to be mindful of whether or not you are asking for something. So these are undeclared tokens right now. Okay, so hello string and token don't exist, so the engine will know that it's going to loop through this and fill out this for every entry in the table, and for every entry in the table it's then going to concatenate them, and then it's going to debug text them. So this is the implicit loop that happens because they're both undeclared, right? But if I wanted a token, if I wanted all tokens that had the hello world string, okay, I could do this. And then I'm going to save and build and reload. Oh, and now of course I'm getting a build error because the result string or the hello string is no longer a thing. I'm just going to get rid of that. So if you want to just temporarily take something out of commission, you can do 2 slashes, and then it's going to act as a comment in your code, effectively nullifying it. It's going to break again because obviously I needed to output the token. So now I'm basically asking the database, can you give me all tokens where the result text is hello world? And it's going to do that. So we should be seeing hello and hey. We go back in game. OE list. And sure enough, hello and hey comes out. So these are the 2 tokens that respond to hello world. So this is kind of like a reverse lookup. You wouldn't do that in any real situation, but nevertheless, that's how it works. And I hope, mind-blowing as it was to me, I hope this makes sense. I hope you see how this works and that you're aware of it, because it does matter. Like, for instance, I've often seen code where as part of an Osiris event. People do something like and DB players player, not realizing that. So in this case it doesn't matter because we already have a player, but let's say this was not declared. Now this code here would then loop over all players. So that's characters, that's Shadowheart and Lae'zel and whatever, and implicitly there would be a loop here. So the code would run for everyone in the DB players table, and DB players is where your player characters are added. No, that's it. So there's a lot of databases. There's also a database for all characters in the game, and if you loop over that, you can imagine you're going to be a little bit surprised, and the performance of your script is also going to be pretty bad. Be very careful of this scenario, right? Not necessarily DB players because it's not that big of a database, but if you go over something like DB_items, then you are looping over every single item in the game, and let me tell you, performance is going to suffer. So this is how you can get into a situation where your mod doesn't necessarily kill the game, but it certainly hurts the performance so badly that you don't really want to be in that situation. So be mindful, and this is why I'm showing you this. Be mindful about the implicit looping that happens here, because it's not intuitive for programmers who's used to Java, Python, C#, whatever. That's not how we normally think, but that's how Osiris operates, and that's how functional languages to some respect all operate. Okay, and by now I think we've cooked enough soup on this specific topic. I just wanted to highlight it because it was an eye opener to me when I realized that this is how it worked, and I now wanted to open your eyes as well. Okay. So looking at the time of this video, I think it is getting closer to the time where I need to wrap up. I promised I would show how to do a traditional kind of loop in a programming language like this, like Osiris. There are cases where this makes sense, but in most cases it simply does not. I've just shown you how we can loop over a table and the values. That being said, I've been in a few situations from time to time where I needed a traditional loop. So why don't we set one up? And what better way than to just do a text event. If text event loop and get host character player. All right, so now we need a loop. How do we do that? Well, the way Osiris solved this, because there is no looping construct per se, but the way we can do loops is by using recursion, and recursion is definitely a concept I'm not going to go into too much detail on, but let's, I think for the example we're going to do here is going to be simple enough. So I'm just going to terminate this for now, and then so we're going to need a procedure, which is Osiris speak for a function in many programming languages, and we are going to do procedure loop texts, we'll just call it, and our procedure is going to expect an index. Okay, so the basic idea is to loop through our text up here one by one until we reach the end and output the debug text. And as we've just seen, this is completely unnecessary, but I'm just going to stick with this example for now so you can see how to build a loop. And then when the time comes where you realize, oh, I'm going to need a loop, then you'll hopefully remember this video and be able to do it. Okay, so what are we going to need here? Well, we are going to need some system functions. There are some system calls that I don't even remember if they're documented in any of the guides on mod.io, but there's a few helpers we can use that can give us specific entries of a database table, like db22 texts. And what we're going to do is, so one of them is sysfact at index. So remember, I've sometimes said these are facts. That's the terminology used in Osiris. I don't often use it, but for these calls it does make sense. So sysfact at index will basically say, okay, I need a fact at a certain index of whatever. So I need a fact from this database. Okay. And then the second parameter will be how wide is the database. So how many columns does it have? In our case, that's 2 columns, because we have the token and the text. Then it's going to need the index. And then it's going to need somewhere to place the result. So the idea is sysfact at index will take an entry from db22 text and put it somewhere else. And we can just basically go, this is what I normally do. I just basically take the table name and then underscore sf for sysfact. You can do whatever, it doesn't really matter what you call it. So that's fine. Let's hang on. Okay, let's start with this, and then move up from there. So I'm going to debug text. So for that I'm going to need actually. Let's add this in like so. Player, comma, and then we have this one. So I'm going to go and then let's take the token and not care about the text to keep things simple. So now basically what sysfact at index will do is take whatever is at index position and put it into this database. And then I'm saying, can you please give me the token for this database that was just created? And then we're going to output that. All right. So it's not a loop yet, but it will be. And then up here, we're going to do proc underscore loop texts 1, index 1, player. Okay. And assuming I didn't mess up, there's a reasonable chance of that, I will admit. This should compile. Nope, of course it didn't, because that would be too easy. Oh, it's because this, so what's happening here is that this one, even though it does exist, it has no idea what type token is, because it's not been declared as part of our init section. So I need to tell it that this is a string, because it has no other way of knowing. So let's try again. Nope. Oh, and it's even complaining about parameter 2, even though we don't care about it. Okay, I did not expect that. I was kind of like, well, you don't need the argument, and just ignore whatever type it is. So now I'm telling it that's a string as well. And then it's complaining that this database has never been defined. So this is a warning. It's not really an error. What we can do, however, is declare this as an empty, 2 empty strings. That would also lessen the need. So we shouldn't actually need to declare this, because now the compiler knows that this is a database that has 2 texts. So let's see if I'm right about that. Yep. So let's see what text event loop does for us. Well, it's not going to loop, but it takes us there. So OE loop, it outputs hello, which is what we expect, because right now it is set to basically output at whatever is at index 1. If I change it so that it's index 3, then we should be seeing ahoy. Right? So we go back, then OE loop, and sure enough. Okay, so our sysfact at index is working as expected. It's outputting at the index we need. So let's advance our looping story just a little bit. So what else do you need in a loop? Well, we need to increment the loop and run until the end. Okay. So one thing we don't know is how many entries are in this table. So we are going to add a syscount of db to text, and there's still 2 columns in that, and then put the result into max index. Okay. So now we have a syscount of this needs to be a string. So we loop until we've reached the end. So, and index is less than or equal max index. And all right, so the rest stays the same. Now we have a counter that, so we are sure that if the index is higher than what we have, the number of entries we have, it's just going to terminate here because this statement will be false. Okay. And so we're almost there as far as the loop goes. We will, however, just need one more thing. And we are going to use integer sum. I'm sorry if this is a little bit advanced. Normally, loops aren't really what this language is naturally designed to do. I will, however, just go through the motions of showing you. So we're going to need to add 1 to the index. So if you think C or C# or whatever, you would do for int I equals 1 until I is less than 10, whatever. So the way we do that is we say integer sum of index and 1, and then put that into new index. So just to walk through it, we are looping over text. We are called with an index and a player. The player is just here so we don't have to do the get host character call all the time. And then we count how many entries in db to texts, and we make sure that the index that we have been called with is less than or equal to the maximum index allowed. There's a few things here we should probably okay, let's do that. And index greater than 0, because we don't want to be called with a negative number or whatever, because that would also blow up. So this is just good practice. Okay, so where were we? Okay, so index is less than or equal than the maximum index allowed, and then we're going to take the index we have been called with, increase it by 1, and put it into new index. So now we've done the looping part almost, and then we grab the sysfact at index that we were called with, we take that token, and we're ready to go. So then we debug text, the token, and this is where the recursion happens. We are going to call ourselves with the new index, which we have increased by 1, and the same player. Okay, so now the loop is complete, hopefully. I could very well have overlooked something and this will absolutely blow up, but why don't we just see what happens. So I'm going to do a build and reload. Let's see if it likes what I'm doing here. Okay, so the compiler likes it. That doesn't mean it will work, but it's definitely a good start. And we are calling it with, let's change that actually to index 1. So if this goes to plan, we will see all the 5 tokens appear when we execute the loop text event. Let's go back in game and see if that's true. And here we go. That is a bona fide, genuine for loop in Osiris, which for purposes of what we're doing right here is completely unnecessary, because I've just shown you other ways the game can automatically loop through the entries of a database table. But as I also said, there will be cases where there are 2 or 3 or 4 unknowns in the columns of your database, and looping over it is using just the regular mechanic is just not going to be viable. So it's good enough to have this tool to fall back on, to make a good old-fashioned traditional loop, even though the implementation of it is slightly different than what we're used to. But functionally, it's quite the same. So just to quickly go through it again, you call it with an index, that would usually be 1. So indexes are 1 based in Osiris. So this is index 1, this is index 2, this is index 3. I know if you're coming from the C# world or C world or whatever, then the first index would be 0. Not so here. The first index is 1. Okay, 2, 3, 4, 5. We check that the index is greater than 0. And given that this is an integer, that means it has to be 1 or higher than that. We check, we get the sys count, so we get the number of entries in the db22 texts. We check that the index we've been called with is less than the maximum index that we just got out of syscount. So this is our loop terminator, right? It's going to run until it reaches the end here. Assuming we're not at the end, we're just going to prepare a new variable by doing an integer sum of index and 1 and putting that into new index, because you can't change. Variables are immutable in Osiris, so you can't actually change a variable, right? That's also why you can't do for loops traditionally. But you can create a new variable that is the sum of the index and 1. And then the last bit, we get sysfactored index. So from this database that has 2 columns, add index, please put that row into this database. And then from the newly created database, please grab the token and ignore the hello text for now. With all of that done, please output the debug text over player with the token. And then please call yourself, which is calling back up here. Okay, with the new index, which we got from adding 1 to our previous index. And it's going to keep looping and looping and looping until index becomes higher than max index. And do remember that, because recursion is such that, I mean, if you don't have a termination statement or condition like this, it's going to run forever. And that will blow up your toolkit. Believe me, I've been there. You will end up on your desktop feeling mighty silly. That, in essence, is how you loop in Osiris, or one of the ways. I mean, you could arrive at this in various ways. Just keep in mind, though, that for many scenarios, looping is implicit, and you can do that without going through the hassle of writing a full loop like this. But use it, have it in your toolbox, and when the time comes where you need this, this is going to be really helpful for you. And I think now I've rambled more than long enough about Osiris, and I know I said at the beginning this was probably going to be my last video on Osiris, but there are a few topics that I didn't actually cover, and I think we're going to have to cut off now because I have enough for another video that will be coming up. I don't know exactly when, maybe the next video, maybe in a couple of videos from now. Depends a little bit on how things play out. But here we go. Osiris looping text events. Have fun modding.